in my life and not what I have to try to do myself. Because Clayton tried for a long time to do it himself. Clayton jumped into the deep end of religion and it was too difficult to swim. And sometimes I ain't sitting there on the couch quite like that. But I know in my heart and I know in my head that that's where God wants me at. Just jump in and sail. How else was Paul able to ride that shipwreck, that ship gone bad and land on an uncharted desert isle? How else could he do that? How else could he stand up and continue to speak the gospel in the midst of the storm? It's because he was just saying Jesus. This was Jesus' ship ride. It wasn't his. He was you ever feel this way? He was completely out of control. Anybody testify? Life was happening to him, and he was out of control. And we had a couple choices, and one of them was just jump on the boat, sail with Jesus. The end of the chapter 27 last week tells us the soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners. Remember that Paul was a prisoner. He didn't do anything really wrong. They couldn't figure out why, but he appealed to Rome, so they took him on a boat with a whole bunch of other prisoners and sent him to Rome. Paul was on his way to Rome. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners. That's right, when the boat finally shipwrecked right on the outside of the shores of that uncharted desert isle. And what are they going to do now? Well, if they escape and those prisoners escape, then the soldiers would face a penalty because they escaped. So the soldiers said, we got an idea. We're going to jump ahead of it and we're going to kill the soldiers. But Julius, the commander, the centurion, said, no, I don't want you to do that. And he did that. Remember why? Because of Paul. Paul had found favor with him. He said, no. Don't kill the prisoners. Verse 43, the centurion, Julius, kept them from carrying out their plan because he wanted to save Paul. So he ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest of them were to follow, some on planks and some on debris from the ship. In this way, everyone reached safely the shore. And we ended there that last week with they came up, they all swam the ashore, they grabbed a piece of debris, and they finally made it to shore. Everyone finally made it to shore, and you wonder if they were glad to be ashore. I've shared this story a couple times before you, but years ago, whenever I was flying, me and a buddy of mine, we were flying an airplane in Texas. And the weather was going to be really good. We knew it. So we took off flying west, and the weather kind of started closing in on us. So it was about time to fill up with fuel, so we landed and filled up with fuel, and we started looking and looked at little airports, and I said, Joe, here's what we need to do. We just need to go back up. We need to just scuttle along right near the ground, not very high. Don't tell my wife this story because you like. We'll just scuttle along to the next little town. We'll go just as far as we can. It was this evening, today, and as long as we can, till the weather closes in, we'll make it to the next airport. Well, we took off, and as we took off, I looked up in the clouds, and there was a hole in the clouds. And on the other side of that hole was blue sky. If you're a pilot, that's called VFR on top, visual flight rules. I didn't have mainspring rating. I couldn't fly in the clouds, but I could fly above them or below them. I said, Joe, we're going through the hole. So we went through the hole in the clouds, and we were VFR on top. And it was absolutely majestic. Of all of the wonderful, incredible things I saw, this trip was amazing. We were above, you see blue skies, we are above the clouds. A beautiful sun out to the west. We were plowing into the wind. It wasn't turbulent, but the wind was blowing hard, so we really weren't going very fast along the ground. Don't tell my wife this story. But you see, the sun was kind of starting to set in the west, and we were up in the air above the clouds. We had to find a way to get below the clouds. So I said to Joe, after we make it through this last little cloud bank here, we were kind of headed that way. After we get there, I said, I'm just going to call air traffic control. We'll see if we can start to descend. And we got past those clouds, and we started to descend, and the air just kind of opened up. And by the time we got on the ground and looked back up, you could see stars. It didn't look like that from above. And my buddy Joe insisted to me that I take this next picture. This picture right here, Rollins, that's Joe Pepper kissing the ground. He insisted I take that picture. That's a true story. I'll show my wife that picture. Imagine being out on that ship, ship being torn about for 2 or 3 or how many ever weeks it finally ended up being, and then finally it shipwrecked into those rocks, and the waves were coming up behind it and beating, and the poor little boat was sitting here like this, and the waves were beating on the back of the boat, and it finally crumbled, and Julia said, everybody, if you can swim, go. If not, grab a piece of debris and go to shore. Do you imagine that of those people that went to shore, do you imagine that somebody, when they got to shore, they took the time to kiss Mother Earth, terra firma? I have never been, how many of them were seasick? You ever traveled deep sea fishing? Didn't make it? For weeks they were out in the ocean. The winds were blowing. They had no idea where they were at. They finally came back to ground. May I just ask you the first question? Have you been wrecked or shipwrecked recently? Have you been in a situation in which you could have been killed, literally or figuratively, but you weren't? You lived to tell about it. You made it to the next day. And I just say to you right here in the introduction, maybe today you need to kiss the ground with humble thanksgiving that you're still here. Keith, are you glad that you're still here? He preached Friday night. I'll probably come back to him. I told him I was probably going to call his name this morning. He told his story Friday night about how he probably shouldn't be here. Maybe today, Keith, you need to kiss the ground with humble thanksgiving that you're here, recognizing that God has spared your life and given you another day and extended you another opportunity to live and share and testify and celebrate and have your family put back together. The text doesn't say it, but I guarantee you that some of those things, those people, when they got a ground, they kissed the ground grateful to be alive. What ground would they have been kissing? No clue. On some uncharted desert isle with Gilligan and Skipper 2. With the Apostle Paul and Julius 2. Dr. Luke, apparently without his wife. There may have been a professor and someone named Marianne. Here on some uncharted isle. 276 to be exact. Not about 276. Not somewhere between 270 and 280. 276. Dr. Luke recorded it for us in Acts chapter 27. Today we're in Acts chapter 28. And let's look this morning at the first 10 verses. And I just wrote here, I'm going to read this. Clayton, are you trying to drag out the book of Acts? No, I'm truly not. I'm just sharing the story as it comes to us and it comes to me. We'll be done real soon. Once ashore, verse, by the way, there you see the title, Snakehandling on an Uncharted Desert Isle. This ought to be fun. Once ashore, we then learned that the island was called Malta. There was no neon sign that said, welcome to Malta. There were no airplanes flying over with banners for Bubba's Crab Shack all-you-can-eat buffet. They had no clue where they were. May I show you and remind you on the map. Here they were, wandering aimlessly in the ocean. There was no sunshine. There was no moon. There were no stars for these weeks. They had no navigational aids. They were wandering out in the middle of the ocean, and they had no idea where they were. They were wandering around. They could have been up down here in Egypt. They could have been back over here in Greece. They had no idea where they were at. And when they got to shore, somebody said, hey, where are we at? And one of the local people came up and said, you're on the island of Malta. Malta? We're on Malta? What, you mean we've been out here wandering all of these weeks, not having any idea, going in circles in our lives, in the middle of a storm, not having any idea where we're at, and we've emerged on the island of Malta? Well, Malta's right on the way to Rome. Malta's right. We would have had, it doesn't matter where we would have gone, we'd have had to come by Malta. We wandered around for those couple of weeks, and we found that we've landed. We're right on course. right on course. And I just challenge you today from verse 1. Can I just go ahead and tell you that if you've experienced being shipwrecked, anybody? You don't have to raise your hand besides me. Well, thank you. A couple hands went up. You ever been shipwrecked and you're wandering out in the ocean in life and you're going in circles and you have no idea where you're at and you can't see and you can't see God, you can't see sunshine, your life is totally out of control? May I just give you courage? When God brings you to shore, you will be right on schedule. You will be in Malta. And Italy's just around the corner. We just got to go around that one island and boom, we're home free. God brings, He's not going to allow that storm in your life to go unredeemed. You get through that storm, God's going to have you right on course. Right on course. We're in Malta. I would have bet 1,000 places, but I would never bet that we ended on the island of Malta. God's not going to waste shipwreck in your life. You know what I had the opportunity to do? If I want to, I can jump on the love seat and I can sail with Jesus. You ever felt out of control of your life? We got some options, don't we? You know what God wants me to do? He wants me to enjoy the ride. It's reminiscent of the picture of the disciples in the boat and the storm's up and Jesus just sailing with himself in the boat, in the bottom of the ship. Verse 2, they finally made it to shore. Somebody said we're in Malta. The local people showed us extraordinary kindness, for they lit a fire and took us all in since it was raining and cold. It's one of those beautiful images of heroic human kindness that we often see. It's the image of 911 when the towers collapsed and the people came along and they helped other people. It's the image of one town under flood and the next town coming and helping them. It's one of the beautiful pictures of human kindness, and I would suggest to you that it's an argument, a strong argument, for the existence of a creator who created humans. We're just all humans. The evolutionary theory of the survival of the fittest would say, sorry, I hate it, this is our island, you're not going to come on the island. But the picture of human kindness, the picture of people helping other people, is a beautiful, strong evidence for the existence of God. 911, hurricanes, flood relief reports. And I would offer to you that on that morning, not yet, thank you, Ron, never did a hot dog over a fire at breakfast time taste so good as it did that morning on the island of Malta. People brought them in, and they showed us extraordinary kindness. They lit a fire. Man, wouldn't have you liked to be part of that bonfire on the day of coming out of the water? Verse 3, the first part of verse 3 says that as Paul gathered a bundle of brushwood and put it on the fire. May I just offer to you, don't miss it right here. Paul was in the game. Paul had been one of the prisoners. He'd been one of the guys on the ship. They landed in Malta, but Paul was over there grabbing firewood, doing his part. He was in the game. I'll just leave it at that. It's entirely possible that Julius said, look, prisoners, go get the firewood and build a fire. Perhaps Julius made the prisoners do it, but even if he hadn't, I would suggest to you that Paul would have been the one who'd gone over and grabbed a bundle of firewood and carried it over here to the fire, because Paul stayed in the game. The rest of verse 3 is Paul gathered a bundle of brushwood and put it on the fire. A viper came out because of the heat and fastened itself to his hand. Wouldn't you just hate to be that guy? Just survive a shipwreck. God said to you, you're going to Rome, but now there is a poisonous snake attached to your hand. Do you imagine that Paul went from just being a prisoner over here getting firewood to being the center of attention? I imagine so. Brilliant, Paul thinks to himself. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to do the right stuff. Paul was trying to do. I'm trying to make a difference. And a snake locks onto my hand. Why me? Why my hand? What else can possibly go wrong in my life? I'm trying to do the right thing. Why does the snake bite me? Instantly, Paul became the center of attention. Can I ask you, has that moment happened to you? You're not looking for attention, but you get the very clear sense that all eyes are on you. Something just happened in your life, and people around you know it, and we're going to see just in a second, people start talking about it. Did you hear about what happened to Hope? Did you hear about what happened to Mariah and Tinsley? Did you hear about what happened to Tim? Started talking about it. You're that guy. It isn't flattering. It's one of those, ooh, people saying, ooh, I'm sure glad that didn't happen to me. Ooh, I'm sure glad that wasn't my bundle of wood that had that viper in it. I'm sure glad that didn't happen to me. And I'll just say to you that verse 4 is an amazing verse. When the local people saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, I told you they were talking. Did you look at that right there? He's got a snake hanging from his hand. Do you know why? They said to one another, this man is probably a murderer. Have you ever jumped to a conclusion? You know what? You know what I mean? He's probably a murderer. He's probably a bad person. This man is probably a murderer, and though he has escaped the sea, yes, he made it through the storm and got to the shore safely, though he has made it to the sea, justice does not allow him to live. Notice that justice is capitalized. Capital justice. There was a Greek goddess named Justice. These weren't theologians. These weren't Bible scholars. These were people living on a remote island in Malta. But I would offer to you that these people knew what justice was. They knew and understood the difference between justice and injustice, between right and wrong, between truth and falsehood, between good and between evil. You know, we've seen that happen in Hollywood all these years, haven't we? Hollywood, who doesn't claim to be the most godly organization in all the world, godly place in all the world, we've seen all for many, many years them produce movies, and in those movies there is a good character and there is a bad character, and who do we always want to win? We always want the good character to come up on top. The good character to win and the bad character to be defeated. These people, they didn't know anything about theology. They didn't know anything about Jesus. They didn't have the Bible. That these people understood that when something bad happens, he probably got what he deserved. Now let me just say to you, the great irony in this story is that the people of Malta were right. Was Paul a murderer? Yes, he sure was a murderer. Had Paul escaped the sea? He slivered. This guy's probably a murderer. He's probably been running for years. He's probably been running from the law. He even escaped the sea. He probably, can I just go ahead and say it? He probably had an experience with Jesus in prison. He probably just had one of those conversion experiences. He's escaped a bunch of stuff. But you know what? Justice demands that if you're a murderer, if you're guilty of the law, it demands, justice will demand that he not be allowed to live. And I'm sure Paul in that moment did not say that, but I'm sure he was saying, you know what, folks? You're right. I was a murderer. And I have had a conversion experience with Jesus. And I have escaped a lot of things in my life. And you are exactly right. Justice is exactly true. It demands that I die and pay for my sin. You are exactly right. That viper grabbed a hold of him and held on to him. What an incredible picture from these people that had no theological background. They were saying justice demands that the truth be executed and this man not be allowed to live. Old Lady Justice caught up with him. Old Lady Justice can be painfully brutal and painfully honest. Justice says you just got caught. Oh, you might have escaped the sea and a bunch of times. You might have claimed some Jesus experience while you were in jail. You might have slivered your slimy self many times before, but it finally caught up with you. You finally got what you've been deserving, and I would suggest to you that they were exactly right. Paul had been a murderer, and justice would have demanded Paul die for that. Amazing. Verse 5, perhaps more amazing. However, he shook the creature off into the fire and suffered no harm. Is that impossible, or is it just highly unlikely? Does this sound sensational? I've got a box right out here outside the door. I'll be glad to bring some in if you want to practice. Does that sound sensational? Did he just shake his hand off? If you're close to God, you can shake your hand off. Does that sound impossible? Were there a bunch of witnesses? Did Dr. Luke write this in a corner? No, there were at least 276 witnesses, plus all the people on the Isle of Malta. He shook the creature off in fire and suffered no harm. Verse 6 is amazing as the other two verses. They expected that he would swell up or suddenly drop dead after he was able to shake that fire. Yeah, you got it to come off your hand. Just watch. Y'all just keep your eye on him. Just a few minutes, boom, he's out of here. Mother Justice caught up with him. They waited that, they expected that he would swell up or suddenly drop dead. But after they waited a long time, they kept watching. They kept looking for Paul to fall over dead. I don't know how long time is, 10 minutes, 2 hours, a half a day. After they waited a long time and saw nothing unusual happen to him. It changed my mind. It changed their minds, and they said, he must not be a murderer who deserves death. This guy must be he must be one of the gods. We've had one of the gods visit us today. Paul didn't say it out loud, but I'm sure that he thought this. You are correct. I was a murderer. I did deserve to die. Justice demanded that I die. But then, right at the last second, just before the judge to drop the gavel, mercy came in. And may I offer to you today that Father mercy trumps Mama Justice. Father mercy trumps justice. Justice says this, Romans chapter 3, verse 23, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. We know that one, don't we? Romans chapter 6, the first part of verse 23, says the wages or the payment for sin, justice demands death. The wages of sin is death. Boy, they had Paul pegged, didn't they? Romans chapter 5, verse 8 says, but God commended or demonstrated his love to us, in that while we were yet sinners, condemned under the law to die, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. The wages, the payment of sin, justice, is eternal life. By the way, Ephesians chapter 2 tells us that we were dead in our sins, and I think it's verse 4 that says, but God, who is rich in mercy. Justice demanded that Clayton die because he was a sinner. I've told you many times I've become a Christian when I was 7 years old. I wasn't that bad. I wasn't a murderer. Freshman in college, I was a freshman. The professor gave us a line, and it said this. It said, man may not be as bad as he can be, but he's as bad off as he can be. 7-year-old kid, I wasn't that bad. but I had violated God's perfect righteous standard. You know what that meant? That meant that I now justice required of me death, because the wages, the payment for sin is death. But God, who's rich in mercy, demonstrated his love for me in that while I was still a sinner, Christ died for me. And then the rest of Romans 6:23, the wages of sin of death, but the free gift of God, the free gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. You know what? There ain't nothing religious in that story I just told you. It ain't nothing about me. Nothing is about me. Nothing about me except that I showed up and I violated God's law, and because of that, I was condemned to die. God, who is rich in mercy, offered me this gift. The wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. You know what I got to do with the gift? You know what I had to do when Miss Alice gave me a gift last year at Christmas? I still got it sitting beside my desk. That beautiful pot that said love on it and had roses. Do you know what I had to do with that gift? I had to simply reach out and accept the gift. Miss Alice, how much can I pay you for that gift? I would have insulted her. It was a gift it was a gift to me, paid for by somebody else. All I had to do was reach out and accept that free gift. Today, the Lord Jesus offers to every one of us a free gift, because mercy, God's mercy, trumps justice. You're right, Maltese people in the Malta Island. I do deserve to die. You're exactly right. I don't know why God just now preserved my life, but God, who was in rich in mercy, had a plan for my life, and he did. I'm not a God, but I have been touched by God. Verse 7, now in the area around that place was an estate belonging to the leading man of the island, named Publius, who welcomed us and entertained us hospitably for 3 days. Leading man, literally that means first man. He's the first man on the island. I don't know if that means he was the mayor of Malta or the governor, or maybe he was just a rich man. He had an estate around there. You know what that's translated? That's translated beach house. Big beach house. Mansionary beach house. The first man on the island. The leading man. He welcomed us. Who was us? First person, so at least Dr. Luke and Paul. Did Publius invite all 276 people? That's a big mansion. Y'all come on up. We got plenty of room. We'll bring out some bean bags and watch television and have popcorn. Y'all, everybody come. I don't know if it was everybody or if it was only Dr. Luke and Paul and maybe a few people with him, because Publius had heard what had just happened with the viper. Come on over to my house. First man. The leading man of the island welcomed us and entertained us hospitably for 3 days. Publius, verse 8, Publius' father was in bed suffering from fever and dysentery. Dysentery means diarrhea. That means he was hurling. Well, you get the picture. Paul went to him and praying and laying on his hands on him, he healed him. Paul healed him. Can I just spend just a little bit of time right there? In 3 days, Paul showed up and asked Publius, man, what a beautiful place you have. What do you do for a living? How in the world did you make all this money? Wow, this is incredible. Tell me about your family. Well, Dad's upstairs. I'd be glad for you to meet Dad. But he's been suffering for the last 2 weeks or last few days with a really, really high fever, and he's got the dysentery, and you probably don't want to go hang around very much. By the way, the Holy Christian Standard Study Bible says that was quite possibly food poisoning from a corrupted goat's milk. It sounds pretty appetizing. That's what the Christian Standard Study Bible suggests perhaps was his problem. He's upstairs, and Paul said, you mind if I go up there and visit him and talk to him for a minute? But no, sure, just be careful and take care of yourself. Don't touch anything, but you're welcome to go talk to Daddy. So Paul went up there, and he prayed, and he laid his hands on him, and he healed him. And I just say to you, I wish I had the apostolic power of the Apostle Paul. somebody comes to me sick, I'm telling you what, I'd reach out and put my hands on them, and I would pray for them. We'd watch God heal them. And I just say to you, we're in 2018, and things are different now. You know how they're different? God's still healing people. We got a pile of rocks right here on the ground to prove it. Does it happen that somebody comes around, we pop them on the head and say, be healed, they're healed. Bring on the next one, be healed, they're gone. Does it happen? No, it doesn't happen like that. It doesn't happen that way. Does God heal people today? Yeah. Absolutely He does. And I just want to say this. I don't talk about this very much, but I want to say this. In James chapter 5, the Bible says, is any among you sick? Let him call for the elders of the church. And let them come to him and lay their hands on them and anoint them with oil. That sounds weird, doesn't it? Anoint their heads with a little bit of oil and pray for them. They'll be healed because the prayer of faith will save the sick. Now, I don't have it figured out. I've prayed for a lot of people and they haven't been healed. I'll just say to you that on July the 21st, 2006, at 3:30 in the afternoon, the doctors came into Hannah's room and called us out. And we stood in the hallway, and the doctor said, I'm sorry, the cancer has spread to Hannah's lungs, and she will go very quickly. That was about 3:30 in the afternoon. At 10 o'clock that morning, me and three others, four of us, we went into Hannah's hospital room, and we gathered around her, and we took my brother-in-law, Hannah's daddy. If you're a daddy and your daughter's in that position, you'll do whatever. He took a little oil and rubbed it on top of Hannah's little bald head. And we circled around her and we prayed, and I remember praying, God, if you had asked us to pat our heads and rub our bellies, we'd do it. Whatever you suggest, if you told us to do cartwheels down the aisle of the hospital, we'd do it in desperation. But you didn't. You just call for the elders, let them come together, rub a little oil on their head, and prayer of faith. We didn't know, I'd never done that before. We didn't know what we were doing in that hospital room. At 10 o'clock in the morning, when the doctors came in at 3 o'clock and said, Hannah's the cancer spread her lungs, she'll go very quickly. We didn't know what we were doing. Saturday morning, Hannah was no worse. On Sunday morning, they came in and took an x-ray of her chest like they'd done every morning at 4 o'clock a.m. And a few hours later, they came back at 8 o'clock and took another x-ray. Why? Because they were surprised at what they saw on the first x-ray at 4 o'clock. On Monday, Hannah was no worse. And on Tuesday morning, they took her off of that ventilator. And she never experienced another problem with her lungs the rest of her life. Now, on November 9th, 2006, Hannah got the ultimate healing. She stepped across the grapevine. God took her. But I'm going to tell you right now, on July 21st, 2006, it wasn't just us. You need some more witnesses? Ask Parmela and ask David. David was there because he brought his daughter Allie there that sings for us. They were there. Why? Because everybody flew to Texas to watch Hannah die and to tell her goodbye. And they were there. There were a boatload of witnesses who watched on that day. God reached down and touched Hannah's lungs. I just want to gently say, I sound like I'm on a soapbox, but I'm not. I'm just saying, oh, Jesus. I just want to say to you that if you're welcome, just like James said, any among you sick, let call the elders. I don't know if he did his hands. I don't know if they had to do his prayer, prophesy about a mobile phone or not. If any of you sick, you're welcome to call the elders of Church 247. We'll come to you. We'll pray for you. And if you want us to, we'll rub a little bit of oil on your head. I don't see Miss Carol here this morning, but if you need a little witness, just ask Miss Carol. Miss Carol just last week, we had a bunch of yesterday's teens in our home. Think about that one. Yesterday's teens in our home, and we shared stories. Miss Carol shared the story about how the elders, the men, the leaders from this church went in her home and prayed for her. I don't understand why God decides sometimes to heal and sometimes not to heal. I just know that's the only thing we're given in the whole New Testament. Anybody you sick? Then call for the elders, lay your hands on, put a little oil on their head, the prayer of faith will save us. Verse 9, after this, the rest of those on the island who had diseases also came and were cured. Yeah, I bet so. I wonder what that receiving line looked like. I imagine it looked like this. Dr. Luke stood right here, and the person came to him, and he looked at him and diagnosed him and said, hey, Paul, this one has dysentery. And Paul prayed for him and is healed. Hey, Dr. Luke, this one has a skin disease. And he walked over there, and Paul prayed for him and healed him. And Dr. Luke, the medical doctor who was not sensationalist, he was after facts and data. He wanted to see this stuff happen. He stood there and watched jaw-droppingly. Paul, this person, I don't know, I think this person has a tumor. I think this person has some cancerous tumor. I can't do anything about them, Dr. Luke said. Can we do anything for them, Paul? Walked over there, and Paul prayed for them, and they were healed. I don't understand when and how and why God chooses to heal, and when and why and how He decides not to. But I'm going to tell you right here, we got a pile of rocks that says God answers prayers today. The rest of those on the island who had diseases were also cured. They lined up in front of Dr. Luke, and he diagnosed them and passed them on to Paul. This happened in the house of the leading man in the community. Can I just take 1 second? I'm about done. And say to you that I've been praying, we've been praying as a church for a long time for zero rent. And we have, on the 5th Sunday, we take up an offering, and we're putting that money in, and it's not very much. And I'm just saying, with Jesus, when we get enough money, we'll do something. I don't know what it's going to be like. Maybe somebody will drop money in our life, but you know what I'm praying? Honestly, this is me being transparent. I'm praying that the leading man in the community will show up, and he'll hear about Church 247. And he'll hear and show up. But I understand, Pastor, I understand that some people's lives have been changed and helped. I understand that our community is better because of the work that Church 247 is doing in our community. I understand that some good things are happening. I understand, Pastor Clayton, that last night you sat in the living room on a brand new sofa looking at a 55-inch TV, and you were sitting in the house of a young man who 3.5 years ago had been strung out and addicted with alcohol for 10 years in his life.
Amen, Lord. Amen.
We call it our little divine intersection spaghetti line. He showed up. We loved on him, and he loved on us. And we've got to watch God work in his life, and he just bought a house with new carpet and put in new ceramic tile and painted it and has new furniture. He has life. He's a functioning, contributing member of society. I hope the leading man of the city shows up and hears testimonies about how God has taken your life and my life. And he's taken the broken pieces and he's put them together and he is making us whole again. And we are impacting the community. I desire that the leading man of the community show up and say, I hear you're thinking about building something. Can we help you? Well, that'd be a jaw dropper, wouldn't it? Wasn't expecting that one. Verse 10 says they heaped many honors on us. And when we finally sailed, we're going to cover that next week. We're finally going to get on the ship and we're going to end up in Rome. They heaped many honors on us, and when we sailed, they gave us what we needed. Can I just say that's reminiscent to me of Nehemiah serving in King Artaxerxes' court and saying, the people back in Jerusalem, their town is in ruins. Would you help me? And the king said, yes, you found favor with me. He gives Nehemiah all of the resources he needs, and Nehemiah goes back and does the miraculous work of building a wall around the city in 52 days. And I just pray for Church 247 as much as anything, is that God would favor us in the community. And that people in the community would say, yes, we see it. Yes, we see lives being changed. We see people going from being religious people to just sailing with Jesus. We see lives being changed. We see hearts being touched. We see, that's what Publius did. He had no background whatsoever, theological background whatsoever. That's what Publius saw. He saw the impact of a changed life. He saw the impact of what the Spirit of God can do in a person's life. people on the island said, y'all are on your way. Can we help you? They gave us honors. That word honors is used other places in the book of Acts to be the word money. Here, take this. We believe in your ministry. Take this money and go your way. I'm just praying the Lord would do something that Church 247 would find favor in the community, and the leading man in the community, whoever that is, the mayor of Bowling Springs, would show up. We hear the work that you're doing, and we're watching God's lives. We're watching God help people's lives. We're watching God move people from where they are to where He wants to be. Favor, I pray for you and for me and our church in the marketplace. We pray. If you're here today,